Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Back home. I have the lights turned off because I don't think I've ever shown the lit up cue. This guy's subscriber sent it to me several weeks ago, and I showed it when I got it, but I've never, he put lights in it. It's battery powered that you can, there's a switch on the back, you turn it on, it all lights up, and I never really shown it before, so have the lights off and have that lit up. Anyway, I just wanted to show that. So I'm doing a sort of a special Sabbath broadcast. Let me turn on the lights here. Doing sort of a special Sabbath podcast today. Rather than obviously I didn't do my lighting of the menorah last night, and kind of don't think I'll be doing my hike today just because I'm sort of recovering from my whirlwind trip. But I did want to do a special Sabbath podcast today to just sort of reflect on just the incredible trip that Yah told me to go on. It's from the very beginning to the very end. It was very special. So when I first, obviously it was very unexpected. When Yah told me to go, I was like, whoa, really? I mean, it was not something that I was expecting at all. And in fact, when he first sent me, I thought the main reason he was sending me was just so that I could film the Salute to America, the very special thing that no president has done for 70 years. It's been 7 decades since any U.S. sitting president actually stood at the Washington Mall on July 4th to address the American people. So I thought that was the main reason, but it turns out that wasn't really the main reason. I think the main reason was all the divine appointments that I had from the very, sorry, my throat's still a little raw from preaching. All the divine appointments that I had throughout the course of the journey, and then the preaching in front of the White House. And I'll get to that in just a little bit. So when I first started, I stopped for the night in Seattle. I flew from Juneau to Seattle and I stayed the night, and because of that I was able to meet up with Jean and Candace, who are a husband and wife that have been attending my Zoom room prayer meeting for months and months, but I've never met them actually in real life. I met with them, and then also met another subscriber named Cynthia, and she had been a subscriber for about a year or so. So we all met, we had a really nice dinner, really good fellowship conversation, and then we went out of the hotel and we just had an incredible time of prayer. And we prayed for Candace's health, we prayed for me and my trip, and it was just, the Holy Spirit really, really, really descended in a very powerful, tangible way. And I thought, wow, this is still just the very beginning of the trip. I haven't even gotten to DC yet. So it really encouraged me. I thought, man, this is going to be an amazing trip. And it was. And in fact, Cynthia had even said, I'm going to pray for divine appointments along the way. And it happened. I can't even remember all of them, but there were several different, whether there were shuttle drivers. I remember the shuttle driver from the hotel in Seattle back to the airport the next morning. He was a divine appointment that I was able to give a card to, and it turns out he was a big Trump supporter. But we talked, I shared with him quite a bit about the ministry that I do. And there were just many others. When I was in DC, I was using a Lyft driver, many different Lyft drivers to get around. I didn't rent a car because it just didn't make sense. And there were several drivers that were divine appointments that I was able to minister to and talk to and give cards to. So that was a real blessing as well. When I got into DC late that Tuesday night, I still at that point did not even know I was going to actually go to the White House and do street preaching. But Yah started gently sort of saying this was kind of what he wanted me to do. And by the time I woke up the next morning, which was only a few hours of sleep because I didn't get in until like 10, 11 o'clock Tuesday night. And then I was up by, oh, and you remember I think I made a YouTube too because I couldn't get to sleep because I was still in Alaska time. and so I only had a few hours of sleep when I was up at like 8 o'clock the next morning. And I had been texting a couple of subscribers that wanted to meet up with me, including the husband and wife that were going to take me to the to dinner or lunch at the Trump Hotel. And I said, yeah, I'm going to I'm going to go to the White House at noon. Well, that wound up changing too. I wound up going around, I think I left around 10 o'clock in the morning from the hotel. And I'm glad I did, because I showed up at the exact right time where this beautiful Trump rally they hadn't quite officially started yet, but they were going to begin. If I had waited later till noon, I would have showed up too late, because at that point the Trump rally would have been in full swing. They had microphones, and I wouldn't have wanted to interrupt that. But I showed up at just the right time where they were still gathering and setting up, and then of course they were having some protesters as well, like the homosexual, the sodomite with the flag. So it was a perfect time, and I had no idea that was the perfect time, but Yah did. And so of course I did the street preaching, and it turns out that street preaching, not only did I get so encouraged by people who were there, but also so many people either on the comments or who emailed me said that they were so encouraged by what I did. And again, I didn't even know I was going to do that. And I'm gonna talk about that a little bit toward the end of the video, about the significance of that. Of course, then I got to meet Linda and her husband Steve, and they just blessed me with this incredible meal at this, I think it's probably a 5-star restaurant right there in the Trump Hotel. Excuse me. Excuse me. Pray for my throat. It needs to be healed. And yeah, I know people said, why don't you just get like a audio mic next time you go preaching? That's actually a good idea. The only problem is I know that a lot of places, when you do that, even if you're on public property, you have to have like special permits in advance. So it was just a beautiful meal, and the food was obviously incredible. And then we just had a really good time of fellowship after that. They took me up into the tower of the Grand Post Office that is now the Trump International Hotel. And we had then they took me to the room. They're both very godly people. They love Yah very much, and it was just such a joy to fellowship with them and to share with them, and they shared with me, and I really, really liked that fellowship. And then after a few hours of that, I didn't know really what I was going to do, but I just prayed, and Yah just guided me. I took a lift over to the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, which was really special. And then I tried to go see the Lincoln Memorial, but I couldn't, because there was just too much construction, or not construction, but the rafters and all the stuff that were, the bleachers, excuse me, and all this stuff that were surrounded there because of the speech that the president was going to give the next day. But then I was just sort of walking down the street, and I saw the Capitol building, and so I just prayed over that and took some photos. And there was a police officer right there. I said, where is that double-decker bus where you can sit on top and it's open air, you feel the wind, on your face, and you get to take a tour? And he's like, oh, it's just down that street right over there. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And it had been so hot and humid that day, it was now starting to be evening, so now I could actually get on I was imagining being on the bus in the evening, in the cool of the evening, the cool breeze. So I went over there, and there was, I saw there were a couple double-decker buses, and they said, yeah, they're still running, but look at the line. And the line was like, quarter of a mile long. It was just people and I was like, well, I don't want to buy a ticket, because I want to make sure that I get a seat on the very top, not in the bottom. I want to be on the very top where it's open air. And the guy said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you just go sit over there, and if I still have a space available after getting all these people on, I'll sell you a ticket and let you know. I said, okay. So I sat down, and like 10 or 15 minutes later, after all these people filled up 3 or 4 buses, there happened to be one seat left on the very top that no one had taken. So I got that seat. So that was such a blessing. So I got to go on this really cool 2-hour tour where they showed all the different sites of DC, and it also went down into Virginia. At one point, as it was almost completely dark, we stopped and got off and went to the Vietnam Memorial and also the Korean War Memorial. And we went to the Korean War Memorial. There were all these beautiful fireflies just right around the statues. It was so beautiful. And so that was a lot of fun. And then And then I went back home to my hotel that night because it was pretty late at that point. And then of course the next day was the 4th of July. And I really didn't have anything planned until that evening when I wanted to make sure I got, the Salute to America, that fireworks rally all, documented. So I got up pretty early, and by 7:30 that morning I got up, and I just decided, well, this is really my last full day here, so I better pack it up with stuff. So I took the first Capitol building tour, where they take you through the entire Capitol building, and I just prayer walked the whole way. I was just praying against the satanic pedophiles that are in power in those halls, and praying that Yah would restore righteousness. So I did a lot of prayer walking, learned a lot of fascinating things. We had a really, really, really good tour guide. You probably have to be one of the top tour guides to be able to be a tour guide at the Capitol building, but it's pretty cool to be there on the 4th of July. And then I took this underground tunnel that links the Capitol building to the Library of Congress. And if you know about the reporting I've done about underground tunnels in DC, as I went through this tunnel, the specific tunnel, which is more one that's just below the surface, the public uses it, I was just praying against all the DC tunnels, that any nefarious stuff that's been going on with the child sex trafficking would be dismantled. So I prayer walked through that. And then I took a tour of the Library of Congress, which was incredible as well. It was very, very beautiful, just stunning. And the highlight of that was right toward the end, they showed the Gutenberg Bible, which is sort of the mainstay of the entire museum. Or not museum, the Library of Congress, which is not a museum. You can use it actually as a library, but of the tour, they showed that at the end. It was really beautiful. And then amazingly, I didn't even know this existed, but that morning in the hotel, I'd seen this pamphlet that said the Museum of the Bible. And I was like, what is that? So when I was done at the Library of Congress, I went over to this thing called the Museum of the Bible, which I think might be a new museum, because I had never heard of this. It wasn't mentioned in the tour. But this Museum of the Bible was incredible. There were 6 floors. And the 3rd floor was this all immersive world of Jesus of Nazareth. Then they had a thing called the Story of the Old Testament, where from the very beginning of Genesis all the way through, you go through this ride where there's all these, you basically are living the entire Old Testament. It's incredible. And then I took a tour there as well. I took about an hour and a half tour there that went through different parts and highlighted the museum. So that was amazing. And when I was done with that, I get another text from my friends that I'd met, and they're like, hey, we met this really neat couple from Florida. Would you like to come back to the Trump Hotel and we'll treat you again? And I was like, oh my goodness. So I went back to the Trump Hotel, and they treated me to another meal, and I had so much good fellowship with them and their friends from Florida. Obviously they were avid Trump supporters as well. And really, really, the fellowship was like a highlight of my time there. And then, of course, that evening I took a lift over to the Washington Mall, where I recorded just a few glimpses of all that happened there when the president was giving his speech. So just from the very beginning to the very end, Yah really, really blessed this sort of unexpected, unplanned meeting. It was totally Holy Spirit driven. And I wanted to share something that Yah had spoken to me, sort of like a prophetic word, when I was flying back to Juneau yesterday. And when I got in late afternoon, and I was pretty exhausted. I actually went to bed last night at 8:30 last night and didn't wake up until about 8:15 this morning. So I slept for like 12 hours. So Yah shared with me a few things, but one thing I wanted to share, and this is based off what happened on this trip. In terms of the street preaching aspect of this ministry, I now have greater clarity how that will work in the future. Like what happened at the White House, my future street preaching will be unannounced and unplanned in order to be as strategic ambushes against the enemy. I'll be normally doing my investigative journalism every day as I have been, with rare strategic street preaching strikes throughout the year as Yah leads. I didn't even know he was wanting me to go to DC to do any street preaching. I thought it was just to film the Salute to America for my subscribers. But now I realize the main reason for going was the street preaching I did in front of the White House, which encouraged so many of my subscribers. The fact that Yah, didn't even let me know I was supposed to go preach in front of the White House until the day before confirms that he will keep my street preaching hidden from prying eyes, and especially from the enemy, to maximize the effect that the street preaching has. Yeah, and that's important, that I do it. You don't just go out whenever, you do it when Yah specifically directs you to do it. I also hope it encourages a lot of people out there who had emailed me or who had commented and were just going almost off the deep end by screaming out about how I shouldn't go because of Antifa and they're going to throw acid in my eyes and all this stuff. I hope that my trip demonstrates to those of you who were in that mindset that you got to stop paying attention to both the mainstream media and the alternative news that is really not being led by prayer or the Spirit of Yah. They may have some truth here and there, but if they're drumming up fear and paranoia, and then it turns out it actually was false, which in my case I knew Yah told me to go to DC. Hopefully it'll encourage you to really pray for discernment about who you listen to, where you get your news from, what sources you go to get your news. I know when I present my news, when I present my investigative journalism, it's bathed in prayer. It's bathed in prayer. And Yah every day helps me to find the content and stories to report on. And yeah, sometimes I'm wrong, and I admit that. It's very rare, but sometimes I am. But I do always admit it and correct the error. But you'll always get very reliable news here. Hallelujah. All right, God bless you guys. I've gone pretty long here. So Shabbat Shalom. Have a very wonderful rest. I'll be back in the full swing of things as this upcoming week unfolds. Shabbat Shalom.